It's weirdly difficult sitting down in this, as might be expected, given its volume, its size, its general extravagance. But yeah, here we go. Look, the coat is finished. I thought I'd give you guys the payoff that you so richly deserve from the off in today's video. Put the cart before the horse, as it were. But there be the horse, if that's how we're gonna continue this metaphor. And what do you think? Please do let me know. I, for one, am pretty pleased. I've spent 6 months basically working on this, and it's more or less panned out as I'd hoped. It is nice and roomy. That again was part of the design. I wanted to err on the side of roominess and make space for all of those winter undergarments, you know, jumpers and so on, just extra layers that are gonna be appropriate for me to wear in this coat's season, you know, from first to last frost, if you don't mind me being so poetical. And yeah, I mean, it's roomy enough that I could perhaps even have basically done the button arrangement for a double-breasted coat. There is that much extra fabric in here, extra room. It would have thrown the balance off, so I wouldn't have done that, but you know what I mean. But when I do use this pattern again, which I think I will definitely reduce perhaps the roominess a little bit, so bring everything back in just a touch and maybe go for an inherently more fitted look. Length I'm pleased with. If you recall, I removed, I think, a whole 15 centimeters off the length. I think I could gladly take another 15 centimeters off and not necessarily miss them, but I do like this extra length. It's just slightly more, I don't know, slightly more distinctive, I think, and yet still not so far towards the ground that I will be dragging my darling hem through any dirty puddles or other, you know, other muck. I like the hang of the sleeves. I seem to have gotten lucky with my sleeve pattern, just sort of getting it more or less correct first time. There's obviously some things that aren't quite perfect about it, I would imagine, but you know, I think overall it works, and it's, yeah, they're hanging nicely, those sleeves, and also the overall balance, I think, of the coat is pretty good. I think with the sort of the straight front, the very straight front of this coat, really make it very clear if the balance is or isn't kind of going in the direction it should be, i.e. straight down. And I think also from the side view, yeah, things look good. I think it's really just a couple of the sort of more superficial things, above all the pockets, these hip pockets, that are kind of bothering me. When I made these pockets, I actually explicitly moved them further down from where I'd originally planned to put them by about 5 centimeters. I think if I had my time again, I would completely reverse that, and if anything, push them a bit higher. I would want them really sitting right on the sort of the top of my hip bones. So really just kind of almost like in line with my belly button. They're comfortably further down than that. I mean, not so far down that I think it looks ridiculous, and they're perfectly functional. I don't think they look weird or anything, but I do notice that when I put my hands in them, they are kind of almost too deep for me to reach to the bottom, or they are too deep unless I bend over. Obviously that's partly to do with just how deep I made the pocket bags, but yeah, I think next time these pockets will go a little bit higher. And then also the belt, I don't know if it's a bit weird after all. I don't know if it's perhaps a look that I'm so fond of now I see it on myself, but again, it's useful with the roomier garment to help cinch in the waist, and also just to, you know, create more of a wrapped effect if it really is a cold day and whatever. I just want to feel a little bit more snug. Again, in the next coat, I would sort of leave off the belt altogether and just aim to get the fit sort of, you know, exactly right, and not require it to do that sort of shape producing effect. Yeah, I think as far as the cuffs as well, the sleeves, I think I would do a fancier cuff after all. You know, I didn't really spare myself any trouble last time by doing it the way I did. If anything, I just made more trouble for myself. I might either just do sort of more like a suit jacket cuff, you know, with a surgeon's cuff, or just, yeah, I mean, as I might still do surgery-wise, haha, on this one, just add some of those little sort of straps to kind of help tighten up the cuff, you know, for a particularly windy day. But yeah, so there it is. Like I say, I'm overall pretty happy with this coat. I know I say that about all my projects, but that is about where I usually land on them, are sort of like, you know, 6 to 7.5 out of 10. And yeah, I look forward to wearing this in about 6 months' time when the seasons turn again. Like I say, please let me know what you think about it in the comments. But for now, I think let's cut to the first of several past versions of me to see how some of the last steps of putting this coat together were achieved, were taken or not, or, well, you know, however stumblingly, if you like. Oh, past me. If only he knew what lay ahead of him. Let's go and visit. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that little charade from future me. Back here in the past, of course, this sausage is yet to be fully made, so let's go and see what we have left to do. And I hope future me was able to convince you, and indeed myself, himself, that said sausage was agreeably tasty, if not outright delicious. This metaphor has already gone out of control. Let's get sewing. I almost said knitting there. This stuff is really, as an ambient feature of my environment, really sort of getting in my head. Cool, so first things first, what have I been up to since last we saw each other? Yeah, as you can see, above all, the basting stitches have all come out. Yeah, I whiled away, I think, a full-length feature film doing that. And yeah, where was it? So, well, obviously the second sleeve has been attached, and I've even fully done the sleeve heads. I have even closed the lining on, well, actually only on one side. I'll do the next bit in a minute, and we can talk about what's going on the inside here. In fact, why don't we just do that right now? So what we can also see here first, just in the vicinity of said armhole, is some of the pick stitching I've done on the inside. This truly actually, now I look at it again, is probably the best pick stitching I've managed to do in my little tailoring journey so far. Not that that standard is especially high, not that there is much competition to speak of, but yeah, I had, I haven't got the first to hand. Let me get them actually. So yeah, having not been able to procure my usual fancy Milanese seta bozzolo, don't know why I'm doing the accent, silk finishing thread, I ended up going with the Gutermann stuff, which is more easy to get at just from wherever one might happen to be in the world. And yeah, I sort of rather hastily ordered 4 spools of this, even though one spool has barely managed to be exhausted with all of the pick stitching that I've already done. The idea above all was that this was going to be for the buttonholes. But yeah, once I got it, I realised this colour didn't really match the tweed in the right way. This is sort of more of a kind of, I don't know, really like a sort of emeraldy green than this kind of brown foresty thing that we've got going on. But the beauty of this tweed, I guess, is that there's so many little shades in there that for something just small like a prick stitch or pick stitch, whatever you want to call it, it kind of matches, and if anything, if it stands out a little bit, it stands out maybe in the same way that these little flecks in the donegal tweed pattern themselves stand out. And I ended up getting just one more spool of this sort of, again, more greeny foresty stuff for the actual buttonholes, which I'll be doing presently. But yeah, check out the pick stitching. I kind of enjoy this as a little contrast on the black, the sort of, again, that emeraldy green. And for now, I just need to slip stitch this armhole shut at the lining, and then that will kind of be, it'll be buttonhole time already, I think. So yeah, the good old slip stitch, the way to close by hand, kind of really any seam, slightly from the outside. I think I've done a video on how to do it, which you can find here, let's say, because why not? Public service and all that stuff. Yeah, as we saw in the last video, my attempts to machine sew the sleeve lining and the sleeve proper together, rather than doing the usual hand construction, which in my mind mainly served to accommodate the construction of the vent, which again I didn't do on these sleeves. That method of construction really did in the end cause more problems than it ever could have hoped to solve. That not necessarily due to it being a necessarily more complicated technique or whatever, but I just basically hadn't really fully thought through all of the different things that were going to happen and the little consequences. And again, as I also mentioned last week, I had cut my lining sleeve pieces rather loosely, especially insofar as the length of the hem, so I couldn't really rely on things to line up, which would have made it much easier to do so. And to cut a long story short, what I found was that when I was pulling the upper end of the lining sleeve, so the sleeve cap of the lining sleeve, if you will, up through over here to kind of close it off and fold it under and baste it shut and slip stitch it as I'm doing. Basically, I had way more excess fabric length to work with than I should have expected, really. So I folded it under once the first time, so I folded under the 2 centimeter seam allowance that I'd left in the lining sleeve pieces, and just sort of lined up everything to do the kind of seam that should be done here according to the pattern, if that makes sense. And then when I did it, there was still like an extra inch or two, so a few centimeters just flapping around the inside of the sleeve, and what that meant was at the cuff, the lining would actually kind of dangle down and, how do I illustrate what I mean, in this just sort of folded way, would sort of stick out from underneath the sleeve itself because the lining inside the sleeve was just too long, and obviously that wasn't good. So I just kind of undid it all and folded it under a second time at the top to sort of essentially eat up all of that excess, which seems to have worked. But yeah, it just goes to show that I really should have been much more exact about my hem allowances and them matching and so on between both the garment sleeve and the lining sleeve. But also really, the one thing that doing the attachment by machine versus by hand saved me essentially was just hand sewing the hem of the lining shut at the cuff, if that makes sense. So just basically one hand sewn slip stitch or hem stitch as long as the circumference of the cuff, which I even actually had to redo on one of them anyway when I unpicked what I'd done by machine, and it took 5 minutes to do that. So in order to save myself 5 minutes of hand sewing, which again, am I ever shutting up about how much I love doing hand sewing, I sort of incurred a lot more time in fixing mistakes that had been made with the cutting. And if I'd done it by hand, it would have been much easier to see directly because of the method of how you put the sleeve and the lining together by hand, it would have been much easier for me to see where these discrepancies were cropping up, and just to account for them very easily by just realigning the pieces in relation to each other. I've already said to cut a long story short, but to cut a short story that became long short again, I don't know if I will be bothering to not make my sleeves by hand in the future. I will just stick to my hand making technique that I already know and, dare I say, love. Yeah, and just not try and cut corners that don't even need cutting in the first place. Yeah, look who just stabbed the needle into their thumb. These things happen. I'm not sure why we have these plasters actually. There's no children in our household, but yeah, they're quite cute, aren't they? Anyway, yeah. Just a slightly closer look on what I'm doing here, just in case anyone is not sure. So the slip stitch is where you just come to the side of the previous stitch, come up through and along the seam, sort of hiding the stitch or the needle and the thread sort of behind the layers of garment fabric, or the layers of fabric, whichever fabric it may be. And then your thread will get knotted up like that. That's just standard procedure. Yeah, and then yeah, and then you just keep doing that, and it's more or less how it goes. Cool, like that, like so. Yeah, I wonder if future me has already forecast this particular occasion. Although I don't know. I don't know how you guys have it if or when you are careless enough or unlucky enough to prick your fingers or any other delicate part of your body with a needle or perhaps a pin. I think when you've got like the needles sort of like dangling out of your flesh, it always seems rather dramatic. But literally, I sort of when I came to put the plaster on, I literally couldn't find the cut. I think I've been a little bit over dramatic here, but anyway, that's by the by. I'm literally filming my exploits and putting it on the internet, so I think I'm allowed to be a little dramatic. Yeah, here's evidence of my earlier terrible slip stitching here along the lining seam between the back panels and the side panels. Not great, but when it's black on black you can't really see it anyway. That's the idea. Maybe that's why I'm constantly using dark fabrics, just so the evidence of my terrible handiwork can go unnoticed. Yoink. Okay, getting to the end of this now, and then I'll get rid of this last of this basting. This took a little longer than I thought it would, but it's always the way it goes. Yeah, as I'm sure future Pat editing this will have ensured, this is probably another goosing loosely day. Yeah, just a nice, calm, meditative sewing extravaganza, if you want to call it that. I don't know why you would, but I just did, I suppose, so let's stick with it. Yeah, out you come. Okay, maybe you don't need to watch me do this, actually. Okay, sweet, yeah. So for any of you basting removal junkies out there, apologies for depriving you of that spectacle. But there we go. Both sleeves now done, both lining sleeves now done. Yeah, let's just have a quick talk through the other things I've done as far as finishing is concerned, and naturally, it's just been a massive mound of pick/prick stitching, and Lord knows, I mean it when I say massive. Yeah, so I already touched on the closing of the lining at the sort of inner shoulder seam and the neckline there. Again, just prick stitch that all along that edge. Trust you can see that. Yeah, and again, I think I'm pretty happy with my work there, happier than I've previously done. I think I tried not to be so lazy and take these massive stitches, because obviously these are kind of load-bearing stitches as well, they're not just sort of decorative. Let's see, what else was there? Cool. Oh, I guess we'll turn to the outside. We're here on the collar. This will be the first indication of it. Yeah, the collar and the gorge line kind of thing, that kind of area. Yeah, so you can see here this slight sort of indenting around the edge. That's just from prick stitching along here. Because of the thickness, I did essentially 2 layers of, or 2 rounds of prick stitching, because I could only really reasonably take sort of like, unless I wanted to go out through the other side and then push it back through, which I was obviously too lazy for. I just, took sort of normal natural stitches, if you like. Could manage about 1 centimetre each time, and then what I did was I went back and sort of staggered it and stitched in the gaps between the original stitches, if that makes sense. So, stitch, 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 and then, okay, this is terrible. If that's 2 stitches, then the second round was kind of like going in the gaps like that. Yeah, and it's interesting with the pick stitching, because it's often rightly said that you're not really meant to sort of yank these stitches tight. You don't necessarily want this sort of puckering compression, or at least this is said by some, because it then the idea is then that that's the effect that you necessarily get with a machine that can do this effect. And the beauty of being able to do it by hand is that you can get the stitch type without having to, you know, like yank it so tightly like that. I don't know if that's necessarily so true. I feel like surely there would be something you could do thread tension wise, but what do I know? It's irrelevant. I don't have such a machine. It's fine. But yeah, I do find that with these kind of coats, you know, I think with finishing, say, a suit jacket edge, I indeed would avoid that kind of pressure. I don't want that puckering effect necessarily, but I think with this coat kind of edge, I quite like actually having this sort of textural effect of being able to see this sort of ridging, you know, that there's some line of stitches here that is creating this sort of gap between this, the actual edge of the lapel of the jacket front or the coat front and the lapel itself. And yeah, so that's what I did. I did try and yank quite tightly, and indeed, yeah, I'll see if I can zoom in. You can see any of these stitches there. Really do get lost in the wash. Yeah, so again, with a thicker fabric like this and one that's very fuzzy and kind of texturally yeah, rich, and you know, there's a lot of volume, I guess, beyond the sort of inherent base weave of the fabric. Yeah, I was able to actually take so rather than it being truly these like tiny dot stitches, I could actually take rather large or longer stitches, because since I was then pulling it quite tightly into this, again, quite deep, chunky fabric, those tighter stitches would essentially turn out more like dots. And again, most of the time, these stitches are just barely really visible at all. I think maybe you can see one there, one there, one there. And again, the idea here was that there was meant to be one about every sort of half a centimetre or so, which I think is what, like a fifth of an inch. But yeah, what the eventual effect has really been more, again, I guess textural rather than visually decorative or ornamental, insofar as these little stitches being visible to the naked eye. And yeah, we got the same effect here on the pocket flaps. Not really much to say there, just you know, adds a nice bit of fixity and firmness to them. And oh yeah, I also actually pick stitch along this, what do you call it, you know, this upper seam there where the pocket flaps were attached, because let's say the pocket flaps, sorry, the piping, and because that also goes through then into the pocket flaps and just helps them be attached a little bit more securely. Currently, or previously rather, the pocket flaps were only attached internally in this like one stitch that caught the upper end of the pocket flaps, the piping seam allowance and the pocketing itself, so it just felt a little bit loosey-goosey there. Oh yeah, and here's a bit more lining prick stitching that's on the vent there. Oh god, I do love a bit of prick stitching, I'm not gonna lie. What else? Oh yeah, the belt. Let's talk about the belt. Come on, let's get that out. Won't be needing you for a second. So yeah, first thing to say about the belt is that I shortened it, not insignificantly actually, I think by about maybe a foot overall, so you know, 30 centimeters or so. So just basically cut the two sort of what 15 centimeter sections off each end, folded it then back in and just hand stitches. So it was very straightforward. Again, the wonders of hand stitching there, you really get you out of any jam. And yeah, and then the other thing I thought was that it was both too wide in the end and also too, what's the word? Well, just not consistent basically, because I had I can't remember which seam it would be. I think this seam, so if you remember when I was making the belt, I had, it was kind of made on the fold, so folded over one end and then sewed shut the other end. And then what that meant was that there was one end which had a load of seam allowance in it, was quite chunky, and then another end which was just a fold, which was quite flat. And I wanted it to have, as you see here, a bit more of a consistent thickness across the whole belt. So what I did was, what did I do? Yeah, so can I illustrate this with something? So here we go, amusingly enough, just found some spare fabric of this this particular individual that I like to wear in so many of my videos. But yeah, let's imagine that this was the folded edge of the belt, so the one that I wanted to essentially add some thickness to. What I did was I essentially just pressed it inwards into this almost kind of like a V shape. So tucked that folded edge in, created these two ridges there with the folded edge tucked in, akin to the seam allowance on the other side. And then what I did was I just, well, basted it first, and then I just prick stitched it through, because I've also prick stitched along the edges of the belt, as I mentioned, again, just to add that fixity, create that sort of textural effect of there being just something decorative there. And yeah, so prick stitched through that to kind of fix it in, but obviously that itself wasn't sufficiently secure, so I then also just kind of slip stitched these little knobbly ends of the V, if you like, together. And yeah, that created, I think, And I'd like to flatter myself and say I don't know which end it was, but whatever. Yeah, one of these ends is just hand stitched shut like that. Excuse me. And yeah, so that actually worked out kind of okay. And again, it really was like excessively long, because if you think of how, you know, I don't always want to be using the belt itself. I don't want to always have it on and, you know, closed and wrapped around me. But the problem was that when the coat was then open, the belt was just kind of hanging down from the loops, like the ends of the belt were going down lower than the coat itself and kind of really dangling against my ankles and stuff. And that just didn't seem like something I was going to be wanting to have happen while wandering around and wearing it. So I just thought, shorten it. It still looks fine, or at least I hope future me will have already proven in this video. And yeah, yeah, I think it just looks a bit better. It feels a bit firmer and just, I don't know, more proper really. And that's kind of, I guess, all there is to say about the belt for now. I think it's button time. Okay, yeah, so I've just marked on. I'm just going to do 3 buttonholes on the front here, about sort of 17 centimeters apart. So the bottom one is ending kind of just in line with, I guess, my groin. And then this one is about 2 centimeters below the lapel roll line, you know, the fold there. And yeah, I'm just spacing around the buttonhole position here, just as I probably should have already done. I think just because the layers are a bit thicker here, they're maybe liable to move a bit more. I just want to make sure things are as stable as they can be, because again, I really don't want to get these wrong in any way. Yeah, and I think, so I'll show you my buttons in a second. Yeah, I'm not super happy with my buttons per se, but that is kind of the beauty about buttons, is that you can just, you know, take them off and reuse them and replace them with ones that you prefer. So I'm just going to keep an eye out for some nice ones maybe that would match. And, you know, while on the one hand, since I'm not expecting to be able to wear this coat for another 6 months, why don't I just wait? But on the other hand, you know, again, all it costs me is the effort of sewing on a button and then re-sewing it. So even if only for the purposes of future me to display this coat to you all, as I will have already done so in this video, then I'd say it's worth it. Cool. Yeah, so there's my buttons. It's this kind of, you know, recycled, you know, whatever you call it, you know, polystyrene, etc. Polystyrene, that's not what I mean. You know what I mean, just sort of synthetic button with this little horn effect here, this sort of dark brown I thought was quite nice. I mean, it looks perfectly okay. I think I'm not, you know, I'm not disgusted by it, but yeah, anyway, so this is about 2.7 centimeters wide. So the buttonhole I thought I would do about sort of 3 and a bit centimeters wide, and then it's about the diameter of the button away from the front edge. So yeah, just because again, it's a chunk of fabric, it's a coat. The button will come out here. I think it will just, yeah, I don't want it too close to the edge. I think that will just then feel weirdly dinky. You know, I think with a suit jacket, it would be, what would it be, half the diameter of the button plus like half a centimeter. So if you had a 2 centimeter button, the edge of the buttonhole would be 1.5 centimeters away from the front edge of the jacket, just so there would be this little lip beyond the button when the jacket was closed of the jacket front edge showing. Again, this is a coat, this is chunkier. I think we can sort of just expand those measures a little bit more. Anyway, I don't really need to keep talking about this. We'll get on with it, but it might be that we get on with it after lunch. That's for me to know, and you to also know imminently when I reveal whether I've done that or not. Cool. And indeed, I can reveal to you directly that I have not done that yet, because the first thing I'm going to do is cut the holes so that I can eat in relaxation, and also because this chalk is going to disappear any minute and I might as well just get it over and done with. First things first, have I selected the right side? The correct side, that is. Yes, yes. Buttons on the left. Here we go. All right then. Oh, no. I feel horrible. I always feel disgusting doing this. Oh God, don't like that. Ooh. Yeah, what have we got there? So that's garment fabric, canvas, garment fabric. Chunky enough to say the least. Oy vey. All right, let's get that little keyhole in there. Just a disgusting feeling doing this. Disgusting. Feels really wrong. Oh yeah, what a handsome keyhole shape that is. What have we got there, eh? Is that? Yeah, again, this is the problem with the fabric being so thick, is that I've got bits coming through from the other side, just really confusing me. What is that? Is that like pocketing in here or something? What would that be? Oh yeah, I know what it is. It's the flannel from the chest panel that was coming down as this low. That's why it's got this extra effect here. Okay, well maybe the other ones won't be so difficult then. Cool, but that's about that. Check I've got the right length there. Yep, that's what I wanted. Okay, and then I'm also just gonna, as you know, kind of overlock by hand this seam shut once I've trimmed away any of these unnecessary little dribbly bits. Yeah, I mean, I really love doing buttonholes in that they're just this, they feel like a truly kind of artistic effort. And as I've discussed before, you know, I think when training to do this professionally, I think people, you know, have to practice at least 100 buttonholes just to get it basically down. I've done way fewer than that, but I have noticed, you know, I do feel like my technique has slightly improved since the very first attempts. But yeah, still probably leaving plenty to be desired. But there's no one else going to do it for me, so unless there are any volunteers in the audience. Okay, I don't want to trim away too much because otherwise I might just, well, trim away too much. Am I goosing loosely enough for you? Okay. That's a weird angle here. I think this is going to turn to be quite a chunky buttonhole, given the chunkiness of the fabric. Making sure there's no fraying and whatnot. Yeah, again, I mean, I think one's conscientiousness about, and you know, the effort I'm putting in and the care I'm taking with all aspects of construction sort of grows the more I do it. You know, I think in my first few projects I was in such a hurry to kind of get them pinned down and get the experience under my belt. I was willing to be a bit slapdash, which I do kind of regret in hindsight a little bit, because there does come the point, especially once you've made a few more projects, where you're like, oh, I actually don't feel so inclined to wear that older project now because what seemed adequate to me then now seems a little bit, you know, inadequate. Yeah, but especially also again with this being a sort of special fabric, I want to do justice, as I've said several times over the process of doing this. So I'm going to just try and make sure I take due care. Although I feel like I might already be failing in that attempt, but whatever. This little that little speech was meant to be a prelude to saying that I'm taking perhaps a few more stitches in this little overlock than I would normally do, so that it is actually useful rather than just, you know, simply ornamental or lip service to the idea of doing a little overlock stitch. Well, here I am, back after a surprise, by which I mean unannounced, lunch, because obviously there's no particular reason why that should interest you. Yeah, I just had to take a break after cutting that first buttonhole. It's pretty traumatizing. God, yeah, they're not very straight actually, are they? Bleeding heck. Oh well, can't pretend it matters too much. Yeah, I cut through the second one already and interfaced it, overlocked it. And I'm going to do the other one with my proper shears as I did the second one, because it's a much more satisfying experience and I feel like you deserve to, oh my god, after the trauma of watching me use my little garment snip to do the first one, deserve a little bit of redemptive fancy shears action. Hold on just a second. Are you ready? Oh, bother. Yeah, okay. How much smoother is that, eh? I like butter. Hope I've not cut too far. It's just, oh, it's night and day. Yeah, these shears, and I'm sure I've already, you know, said as much in every other video I've done since acquiring them, have really, really changed my life. Absolutely for the better, of course. Yeah, I mean, just look how clean that cut is compared to the monstrosity that was this first one. I mean, they'll pan out the same in the end once I've ruined them with my buttonhole stitching, but yeah. Oh, love it, love it. Oh, well, you know, it's still horrifically nerve-wracking, but you know, at least each snip only has to happen once. Yeah, it's keyhole-ish enough, I'd say. Right then, good stuff. Okay, so there's my 3 buttonhole holes ready to be buttonholed. Just getting rather circular. So what else do I need? I've got my buttonhole gimp, amusingly named, I suppose, and then, yes, the aforementioned, previously advertised, sort of more, I don't know what kind of green you'd call that really. I don't know, just a sort of greenier, deeper, forestier green of buttonhole silk twist. So again, these are silk strands that are sort of twisted together. And what I need to do is run that through beeswax, press it between paper to sort of firm that waxiness into the thread, which is just going to give it both a nice sheen, although the sheen is already sort of in the thread, in the silk, but also a nice sort of almost wiry structure to the thread while I sew with it. So how much do I need of this again? I need about 1 meter or so. Yeah, I'll just go and get all that ready. Here's my sort of dressmaker's / tailor's beeswax. I accidentally dropped it out of the thing and all these little scrappy bits flew away. But yeah, enough to be getting on with. Yeah, so I think about 1 meter of this per buttonhole will do. Might err a little bit longer and err on the side of caution because I really don't want to have to be, what's the word, you know, tying off an insufficiently long thread midway through to sewing a buttonhole and then starting again. Yeah, so that's more than 1 meter. That should be more than enough. So yeah, wax that. So we'll run it through this like so. And yeah, I mean, these are quite long. I think I have way more silk thread than I need. So while I don't want to be at all wasteful with it, because again, you know, silk is not just that it is sort of precious in and of itself, but you know, it's a kind of also, I guess it's, you know, it's an animal product and you don't want to be too profligate with it. You know, you want to have the due respect for where it's come from. That's not too wishy-washy of me, which I don't think it is. But yeah, as I say, it's only going to spoil the entire effect if I realise I didn't have a long enough piece of thread and that I have to sort of, you know, stitch it together as it were and, you know, stop halfway around a buttonhole to get some new thread and just make a mess of it. Cool, right, I'm gonna go and press this and I'll be back. Yeah, okay, so here we go. Here's this, this beeswax thread. I don't know if you can tell, it's got this slightly more wiry texture. It's not quite so pliable. It's just got a bit more structure here. I don't know if you can really compare that to the, it's a bit looser there, what's still on the spool. Yeah, amusingly also, I seem to have a terrible habit of disrespecting existing pattern pieces as the required piece of paper for, you know, running this through. Obviously, this is not doing very well under the strain. Yeah, this is just, I think, like the patch pocket pattern piece that I made for my summer suit. But who cares? It's a piece of paper. I'm not going to miss it. Oh, hello. It's almost delicious. Cool. Let's get on with this. So yeah, got my thread threaded, and I'm just pulling it in and hiding the end of the thread here, just on the inside of the jacket. Cool, and then I'm going to take the first stitch. So again, I'm going to try and make it quite wide, almost like 1/2 centimeter, I guess, maybe just to account for how thick this this fabric is. This is a really quite difficult actually, and I'm wondering if I should have done this on the double. I don't think so. Now where I've made this first little loop, I'm going to take my little cut of gimp wherever I put it. Who knows where I put it? How'd you get there? Yeah, just insert that in. This is just going to be a normal sort of stitch first, then we're going to sort of start doing the buttonhole stitch on the spot. So, and the buttonhole stitch, as you probably know, is you take the ends coming out of the needle, wrap them around, oops, pull it through. Oh no, has that been caught twice? Don't want that. And then, yeah, sort of maneuver it towards the button opening. Yeah, I think I might have to go for a really very wide buttonhole here. Otherwise things could get ugly. Let's try that, eh? I mean, I think they're going to be ugly anyway, knowing my usual track record of sewing buttonholes, but hope you get my point. Yeah, and then I'm just doing this for the next 4 hours. Okay, so we're back after more real life time than I would care to disclose. I've had a couple of false starts, so I wasn't liking the way it was looking on that first go, so I decided, okay, I'll try doubling up the thread. Try doubling up the thread, don't recommend it, it's a nightmare. Didn't improve anything and it only made everything hard to sew, so I just went back and tried to wax the thread more thoroughly and just accept that probably I would have ideally needed an even thicker, I don't know, an extra ply as it were, with this thread for a fabric this thick, and just trying to find the right tension basically. It's almost like what I said earlier with the prick stitching of, you know, pulling it too tight and the fabric is so sort of fuzzy and deep that the stitch almost gets lost in it, and in this case it's almost the same sort of thing. I want to make sure to pull just tight enough but not too tight so that I'm not then just pressing the stitch into the fabric. Yeah, this one's not panning out so well, and I also think I still didn't take a long enough piece, but we'll see, I suppose. Yeah, I gotta say, I do think my other brand, Buttonhole, is better. I actually was certain, I was really certain that I had 2 spools of exactly this colour basically from that brand lying around somewhere, and I turned the place over, couldn't find a single inch of it. So, you know, I just read the writing on the wall, as it were, and got going. But yeah, this is okay, this is starting to look a little bit more presentable. I hope you would please agree. Yeah, just, you know, practice makes perfect, and I haven't done this in a little while, so just got to keep on keeping on, I guess. Yeah, had to get a new thread in after all, despite all my precautions. Yeah, this one was a bit of an abomination, not gonna lie. I think the less said about it, the better. But yeah, it is interesting as ever to sort of just practice the, you know, the precision with which you really need to make sure that the needle is coming up through just the right position, you know, not a millimetre here or there. You know, this is a calculation I'm evidently continually getting wrong. Oh man, yeah, this is really abominable, isn't it? But, well, I guess it's a drop in the overall ocean of this garment. If I really, really, really despise it, I suppose I can always unpick and redo it, although having done that once or twice before, it's almost as soul-crushing as just letting it be. Okay. Given how long this is taking, future Pat, who you've already spent the first part of the video with, is probably going to be tomorrow Pat, more specifically. Yeah. Truly one of the most abominable things I've ever made or sewn or really just beheld. Good Lord. Okay, on to the next one. Although I'm rather not exactly filled with confidence. Okay, I think this one's going slightly better. I took extra precautions of, you know, getting an excessively long piece of thread this time and waxing it an excessive amount. And I'm really trying to take my time to make sure I land these stitches correctly, but it's just a losing game, really. Damage control. This is just about staying in the territory of tolerability. This is also taking so long. I think really just like the added centimeters and then also just like the added width and the added chunkiness of the fabric makes it so much harder to get this sort of like, what do I mean, this sort of continuous coverage, I guess, by the thread. And I also think that the waxiness sort of wears off because it has to get pulled through so many times. Yeah, this is entering sort of bad workman blaming his tools territory, I suppose, but you know what? I'm literally just talking to myself in an empty room here, so I'll say what I like. Yeah, this has been a very chastening experience for me. I think I really didn't think it was going to turn out so badly, to be quite honest. But yeah, oh well, can only do as well as I can do, I suppose. Yeah, just doing like the little bar tack at the end of the buttonhole now. This is also giving me serious second thoughts about doing a kind of decorative one on the left lapel, because there's no real point in doing something that's theoretically decorative if it looks as shoddy as this, is there? Ugh. Put on there. Alrighty. Well, I'm kind of, you know, I guess this one was marginally better than the first one. So I'm hoping that the next one, i.e. the last one, which is the one just below the lapel, so kind of maybe the most visually load-bearing one, will be, yeah, a little bit, if not significantly better than this one. You know, judging by the progression there. Yeah, I also feel like one day I'm going to declare that, you know, you can tell a good buttonhole by what it looks like on the reverse side, but if you'll prepare for something even more Frankensteinish than what you're currently seeing. My God. My God. Ugh. Okay, never mind about that now. On to the last one. You know what, I think this is going to have to become a problem for a future Pat that falls somewhere between me right now and the me you've already seen at the start of this video. Well, wouldn't want to be him. Well then, how distant a future me are we looking at here? That obviously being the $1 million question. Feel free to take a few moments to guess. Well, it's been 5 days since I last picked up a needle, or at least picked one up and applied it to this particular project. Yeah, it was really remarkable actually how sort of, I don't know if infuriated is the right word, but certainly how sort of despondent I was becoming with the progress of these buttonholes the other day. Oh, all those years ago, last week. I guess, like with anything, any activity, any hobby, don't do it in anger. If you get to the point where you feel like your patience is slipping, then you might as well just put it down for a day. it's really the best bet. And yeah, that was certainly the case with me, because I think as the me that you've literally just been watching mere seconds ago on this video was making very clear, I was extremely unhappy, I think, with the progress of these buttonholes. I felt like nothing was really panning out. And, you know, to some extent I still stand by it, but, you know, I called it a day. I went off and, you know, did some nice things. And despite spending a little bit of that time grumbling about how bad these buttonholes were that I'd done, by the time I got home and looked at them, I was like, you know what, they're at least passable. They're perfectly fine. They're not the sort of shameful aberrations that I've been alluding to them as. And yeah, I just thought, you know, why don't we wait until the muse next sends out her siren call, or rather until the next day that I happen to have time to continue filming, which happened to be today, like I say, 5 days on from what you've just been watching. Anyway, here we go, the last buttonhole. And I'm just going to try not to worry too much about it, because life's too short. And practice makes perfect, I guess. It's probably just because I have now much more time, I guess, to finish this than I had theoretically given myself the other day. But yeah, like, I feel like this is just certainly a more peaceful and methodical feeling process than what I was getting up to all those years ago. Yeah, I thought I'd had something kind of like an epiphany about the thread length with this particular process, because I'd said earlier in the video, you know, many years ago. Okay, I'm gonna stop looking at this now. Yeah, I'd said the other day that because this is quite a large buttonhole, quite a long one, you know, also a relatively wide one, I'd wanted to make sure that the thread size that I was using, like the length of the piece of thread that I sort of, you know, cut out and allocated for the roll and prepared for the, you know, by waxing and so on, was long enough that it would make it all the way around. But as you can still see here, that means it's kind of longer than your normal sort of regulation hand sewing length, where, you know, you don't want it to be excessively long, because otherwise you have to start doing this weird sort of like, you know, sailor pulling in an anchor kind of movement. And yeah, I think I realized, you know, while I had wanted to avoid, oh, balls, yoink. Okay, well, that's all right, we can fix this. Hold that thought. It really does undermine the entire premise of this channel, because Lord knows you really shouldn't be sewing and talking at the same time. Oh, get real, come on. Silly piece of gimp. Yeah, if ever this happens to you, what you can do, i.e., so again, this being the piece of gimp that is kind of providing the structure for the buttonhole and around which all the buttonhole stitches are going, it may well happen to you that, you know, by accident or just sort of absent-mindedness, or, you know, maybe you have a sort of evil sibling who likes to run around your sewing projects and pull the gimp out of your work-in-progress buttonholes. Yeah, just get it on a needle, if you can. Oh my god, I need to find a bigger needle, but this one will do. Get it on a needle and just, you know, carefully run it back through those stitches that you've already done. And that should be fine. You know, you might end up picking up a bit of something you ideally wouldn't, but okay. Yeah, as long as it's broadly speaking, you know, back where it needs to be, underneath that little wrapping of stitches, you're gonna be okay. But yeah, what was I saying about the length of the thread? Yeah, and I'd wanted to have a longer thread for the buttonholes so that I would not have to sort of change out threads mid-buttonhole and sort of have that affect the look of the buttonhole, you know, by having a sort of like a new tied-on stitch or something mid-buttonhole. But I think I then realised that it was sort of the lesser of two evils, maybe, because, oh my god, these shears, this is terrible. Because yeah, the control that you get by having the shorter thread is actually obviously essential to lining up these little ridges of buttonhole stitches here. And if you're working with an excessively long thread, this one is already probably a bit longer than is ideal, but the ones I was using for the other buttonholes were just really ridiculously too long. If that's the case, then, as I say, you're not necessarily going to have that control that you desire. We've done this almost. Yes, okay. The control that you desire for, again, organising those stitches, and you're going to end up with a buttonhole that looks more like this, which, again, is more passable than I was giving it credit for the other day, but it's not exactly, you know, the prettiest princess at court. Okay, yeah, you can see there, I've managed just to slot this back underneath these stitches. It's perfectly likely I might have picked up a little bit of kind of, what's it called? Yeah, the actual fabric itself, but I'm not really worried about that. I just need to get this back in position. Cool, and that already will suffice. Just keep this hanging out here. It doesn't need to be, yeah, in a more secure position. I'll leave that out there for now, and yeah, just carry on. Yeah, so like I say, this thread's already still on the longer side maybe. We're working with it. But yeah, I tried doing it on the double the other day, and because I thought that would also add a bit of extra body, which, you know, theoretically it would have done, but you've just got too much volume then, and it's not going to work in the way you want it to work. So yeah, anyway, on we go. Sorry for that. It's a rather unexpected interlude with the GIMP, but yeah, like I say, there's what have I done there? There's usually a solution to these little gaffes. Let's not despair, eh? Yeah, for whatever reason, this one seems to be going relatively smoothly. And it is interesting, yeah, to really, I think, you know, what I've just been saying about the sort of the thread length and the tension of the buttonhole stitches, i.e. this little knot here that this action is designed to create, you know, that makes these little ridges here along the inside edge of the buttonhole. I think I'd often been quite careless with it, you know, and just been like, well, you know, the idea you just pull it tight and it will kind of find its position. Oh, what have I done here? But you know, I think I've realised the more I get in the swing of it that you do need to really ensure that you're manoeuvring the knot, because, you know, if I pull it out this way, then it's going to go that way, and if I pull it around this way, then it's going to come towards the hole itself. And I think that's something I was still trying intuitively to do it, but I wasn't paying so much attention to it. And again, I think when you then have a very long piece of thread and you're just basically focused on getting the stitch shut in the first place, because, like I say, you know, you're like Popeye trying to haul anchor, then it's, you know, it becomes a bit of a second thought just kind of by default, really. Yeah, it's always a bit interesting rounding these keyholes, because there's this sort of inevitable splaying, I guess, of the stitches on the outside, but that's okay. Don't want to be too precious about it. Yeah, this is a pretty funny shaped keyhole. This was the one that I cut with these little garment shears at the very beginning, and I'm paying the price, but whatever, you know. Small victories and or rather small defeats, I guess, which also counts. You know, try not to take it too personally. I've learnt my lessons from the other day. On we go. Yeah, really pretty pleased with how this one's coming along. I think these stitches, these little knots, are quite even. The stitch depth is quite even. I guess they could be even more tightly packed. I mean, on this side, it's maybe a little bit more consistent. It's really covering up the, you know, as I said, this very fluffy, thick, voluminous garment fabric itself. But yeah, again, after my little breakdown the other day, I'm going to take what I can get, and yeah, just keep on stitching. And I do think I'm probably going to have to replace the thread shortly before the end, although it might be that it's turned out to be just the right amount. Yeah, this is kind of really more or less the last gasp now. Obviously the buttons themselves will go on, but that won't take but a minute. Yeah, I'm almost there. Yeah, I don't remember if I already said, because it was 5 days ago, but there is a slight kind of anticlimacticality to this, again, because it's kind of a bit too late in the year now, or rather, you know, too deep into spring, or too far away from true winter where I am to probably wear this unless I'm, you know, going out for any midnight strolls. And it's funny, really, that sort of the eager part of our sewist brains that, you know, only really gets excited by these projects for as long as they a tantalising prospect clearly ahead of us of getting to enjoy them as soon as they're done. And in that regard, this has actually been quite a good lesson in, I suppose, delayed gratification. I mean, it does feel, you know, on the one hand, this is probably my most elaborate, or at least most kind of large scale and long-standing. You know, this will probably have been about 6 months since I started this project that I've done. Certainly, you know, my tailoring project terms. And yeah, like getting to the end of it now, it just feels a little bit like, well, cool, it's done now, on to the next one. Whereas before with the suits, it's usually been like, cool, and now I have to wear this at my wedding in like 2 days or whatever it would be. But yeah, I think it's not always the worst thing in the world, and I can just try and focus on enjoying these last few steps and enjoying it as a pure piece of craft rather than, you know, essentially an ends to which this these last 6 months have been the means. You know, it is a fascinating object, you know, something like this, especially when one's made it oneself. And I don't see why I can't just appreciate it, at least for the next 6 months until the weather turns again, as such. Where are we now? Yeah, I really think next time I'm doing a jacket or something, I need to make sure I just do 2 sort of warm-up buttonholes on a bit of scrap fabric, because it does always seem to be that by about the 3rd one, I'm kind of back in whatever the swing of it would be. Again, I've not done enough of these to really be able to reliably do them very well. And indeed, there is no particular reason why the other day I should have expected to do any better than what I did do. But yeah, maybe a little practice one is in order just to warm up next time. And then we'll let her rip. Yeah, I mean, it's just funny, obviously the individual fibres, or threads as it were, of this fabric are sort of several times thicker than this thread itself, so trying to get one of them covered is a battle, but the battle I'll continue to wage, or at least for the next few stitches. No, actually, this thread should probably suffice, I reckon. Cool. Okay, I think I've learnt my lessons now that my garment snippers, I always call them garment something, my thread snippers are blunt as, well, my old shears used to be. I think these are the right tools for really any cutting job for the foreseeable future. So yeah, I'm just snipping the gimp now. Cool, and then we'll do a little bar tack as I've done in the other ones. I'll just try and make it a better one than I've done in the other ones. Yeah, and again, I think in the end this turned out to be exactly the right length of thread, more or less. It's nice when that happens, not that it was a calculation I can take any responsibility for. So yeah, bar tacks, in case we don't know. Take a few scoops here. This is just to kind of shore up this far end of the buttonhole, and also just to, you know, it's a nice little decorative touch as well, which you can do really all over the place, you know. The size of your pipe pockets, or your welt pockets at your breast, wherever you want to put them, really. If you can sew it, you can do it. If you can imagine it, you can sew it, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. What's going on here? Alright, just do a couple more, maybe one more, and then, yeah, one of these days maybe I need to sort of like speed run a coat / jacket project just to see A, how quickly I can really do it, and B, to ensure maybe that there's this sort of like marathon finish line-esque runner's high. We did it, you know, we did it, Joe. Kind of emotion coursing through the veins. And then you just scoop through those little loops you've done. You don't pick up the garment fabric, although I don't think it's especially terrible if you do. And yeah, you just sort of create this little stack of crosswise stitches between them. And again, this is another one of those things where don't just yank it aimlessly tight, try and make sure you're maneuvering them into a nice even stack. Not that I've ever done that with any great success, but you know, do as I say, not as I do. Or preferably do neither, you know, just find a more reliable guide. But anyway, you're here now, so I'll say my piece. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, again, it's funny, having talked up this buttonhole the whole time while sewing it, I mean, now I look at it, I don't feel like it's especially dramatically better, or indeed worse than any of the other ones, but it just shows what a difference a day, or failing that, 5 of them can make. I do think this colour was better though than the other thread colour I had. I think it just blends in nicely with this sort of core, one of these core sort of yellowy green shades that is a bit more prevalent in this fabric, because I was originally thinking with that sort of emerald green thing. Well, obviously there is this dark element here, but when you look at it, actually it's a light green mixed with actually just like a pure navy in the herringbone pattern. So while at a glance there is that sort of darker green effect, that specific green is not necessarily picked up in the fabric itself. Anyway, it's a rather oh my goodness gracious me, what's happened there? It's a rather officious note on which to end. Okay, yeah. So now one more, bring this out somewhere far away. So yeah, I can maybe, if I want to, I can always top up a stitch there, but and then, as we know. So again, this thread is now hidden between the layers, because I don't want it knotted anywhere, and then I'll just snip it here, pull it here, so that, you know, I'm sort of compressing the fabric that's in between, then it's going to snap back, and that end is hidden now for good. And there we go. Not bad, eh? Not bad. Not great, but, you know, not bad. I think we know what time it is. Off we go. We'll be using, again, the same silk buttonhole twist. I don't think I need to wax it for this, but yeah, that'll be on the double now. Just take a moderate length and see if I can get all 3 buttons out of it. and hopefully nothing too disastrous will happen. I like to think we're more or less out of the woods by now. So I think normally I wouldn't actually kind of stitch through to the back side, as it were, the underside, the inside of whatever surface I was doing the button for, or at least on a jacket. I don't really like doing that. It always makes the button feel more flimsy than it need to. And again, especially with this particular fabric, which is so thick and chunky and can really just, I think it can take the strain. And again, I don't really find anything particularly offensive about, say, a tiny little tiny little dot of thread on the far side, on the underside, sorry, of the coat facing. Oh, what have I done here now? Oh, come on. So literally every time I turn the camera on, everything goes down the toilet. Oh, I've done that thing where I stitch through a strand of thread so they become weirdly entangled. That's no good, is it? Okay, there we go, that's fine. Yeah, like it doesn't really bother me if there's a little bump of beautiful silk thread there on the underside. No one's really going to be looking, even if they were. I just, what complaint could they possibly have about such a thing? Yeah. Yeah, you see, sewing with doubled up thread is not without its risks, but sometimes you gotta roll the dice. Who dares wins, all that nonsense. Okay, that's probably enough. One more stitch, and then that's numero uno out of the way. Yeah, again, I'm really not enjoying these buttons so much, but I think probably we'll see. I think it might also be one of those things that once I start wearing it, I really stop caring and don't really think about it. So we'll give them a chance at least, won't we? Next year. Well. Buttons on, buttonholes done. By which I mean, coat finished. So you've already seen future Pat, i.e. future me in about 5 minutes, try this on. If you'd like to see me do it again, you can obviously rewind to the start of this video. It's crazy to think how much pain and misery has been endured by yours truly since I first pressed record rather. But I don't want to be too dramatic. I think I've been dramatic enough today. Yeah, thank you for joining me on the coat making journey. If you haven't, well, I don't think I can ever forgive you. What's next, I guess? I might have a little spell of shirt making, although that might be a sort of a holiday sewing situation. I think I might get looking into making a vest, as in a waistcoat, because I've never done that before. It will be a new pattern for me to draft, and then I can start thinking about doing funky three-piece suits, which would be enjoyable. I also have this nice Holland and Sherry, also kind of donegal tweed fabric that I got a couple of years ago, which I wanted to make maybe a double-breasted blazer out of, but that might also be one that I do a little bit later into summer. Maybe have it ready for autumn, who knows? And then I can combine these, I suppose, come if the hour. Yeah, otherwise I might look at doing some further trouser tweaking, as you may have experienced or may have heard me whinging. I've yet to really perfect my trouser situation, but I'm also eager, I think, to do finally a trouser drafting video and almost use that perhaps as an occasion to, what do I mean, to kind of iron out the final creases in my own trouser making practice, because I think it would be the right spur, I guess, to really just clear my head on that front. Cool, but yeah, like I say, if you want to see again how this looks, I think you know where to find that footage. You can just do a fat old rewind. Yeah, until then, I guess, have fun, sleep well, stay safe, eat your greens, and yeah, enjoy the spring if you can, or if you're living down under, my sympathies.